Hello, and welcome to the Dungeon Masters Guildhouse. This is a podcast in which I, your host, Matthew Whitby, sit down with people all across the tabletop and RPG space. I paused for a second there because I thought about changing up the pace. I thought of doing a new and wacky introduction, but I abandoned it midway through. But nonetheless, introductions aside, I'm joined by Sebastian Yūe. Hello.
Hi.
Thank you so much for joining me. How are we doing this week?
Thank you. I'm doing very well, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, no, it's exciting times. It's kind of like I'm at a point where I'm kind of at like a lull between projects, and I'm trying to work out what to work on next. And it's I'm like a child in a candy shop. I don't really know which direction to go.
That's exciting. There's too many possibilities.
That's what I mean. And my gut is telling me I should work on something small. But I know for a fact it'll get bigger. Just through the nature of me selecting it. But no, I guess kicking things off, then Sebastian, for the people kind of listening, what sort of products have you been creating and throwing out there, or what's your association with the tabletop RPG industry?
Yeah, so I'm Sebastian. I'm a TTRPG designer, writer, and editor, and I also do voice acting and modeling, so I suppose I'm an all-around creative type. You might know me from my Copper best-selling adventure Lake of Secrets, which was my debut 5e product. I wrote it during the winter 2019 session of the TTRPG writer workshop, now called the Storytelling Collective. Ooh. It's a dark and magic fantasy dungeon crawl set in a fallen kingdom that has lost a war to demons. And I'm also known for Crossroads, which I released this year. It's a card-based prompt game about grief and loss, which is available on itch.
Wow, fair. So quite again, hot damn, like a real mix. I'm curious. So was it kind of like, I guess, natural to kind of fall into like the spectrum of both writing and editing and what like, I'm just kind of curious about that part.
Yes, it was, because my background is in journalism. I have an undergraduate degree in English literature and French, and I have a master's in journalism. So I'm very used to writing and editing and doing all sorts of anything associated with media production. We kind of have to wear very many hats to be a reporter. So I'm coming at it from that perspective.
This is probably going to be one of the weirdest questions I've ever asked, but is journalism like in terms of writing an article versus writing like a tabletop, like an RPG, which one feels stricter? If that's
honestly, I'd say it depends on the nature of the tabletop RPG. But if you're doing something like Dungeons and Dragons, where there's a style guide you have to adhere to, and the whole point isn't to write like the most flowery prose you can think of, and it's to convey ideas and give a dungeon master all the tools they need to run a game, then I'd say that's actually heavily technical writing, and there are a lot of rules that you have to follow in accordance with that. Whereas writing article, there are conventions that you need to conform to, and depending on where you're publishing, there are style guides to follow for that as well. But you have a little bit more wiggle room in terms of how you tell the story versus if you're writing an adventure and you need to break things up into sections, and it's a very technical document for the DM to follow.
I was going to say, so do you think like there's any aspects of kind of your background in kind of journalism that has kind of like come through like in your adventure writing per se? Like, is there ever sections where like, oh no, I'm writing this like an article?
No, I wouldn't say so, but in the sense that it's helped me refine my sense of narrative. So it's really helped in terms of structuring things. It's start at the beginning and don't just dump people into in the middle of things just because you think it might make a more interesting story opportunity. Tell people what they need to know, be very clear and direct about it. Like, it's actually been very useful.
So then I guess, so was the RPG writer workshop, was that kind of your start in writing any sort of RPGs, or had you done any kind of like work beforehand?
So it was my start in the sense that I came to it with a draft. I wrote up something for a group already, and the way it was written, it was just notes for myself. And I thought, well, there's definitely a way to learn how to write this properly and to get it right. And I looked online and I was like, there's a course for this. I'm going to take that. And so that really helped me to formalize my process a bit more and to really understand what it is I was trying to achieve and how to do it. So they were definitely the catalyst for me writing RPGs in general, but I already did have something written when I came to them.
Interesting. And so I take it, so was it just like a kind of dungeon that you'd thrown at your kind of home game then?
Pretty much, yes. It was a game that this was Lake of Secrets, so I already wrote the draft for that. I actually originally wrote it as a game for an adult support group for trans people with eating disorders. So that's where it came from.
Interesting. So was it the case that you kind of went in with kind of, I guess, very kind of particular themes or kind of subject matter to try and tackle through?
Yeah, definitely. I did. Yeah. But I wanted to, I didn't just want to kind of tell a story that was very obviously about that. I wanted to tell it in a fantasy setting, and that gave players kind of freedom to interpret things as they wanted.
Yeah, no, interesting. So funny enough, this is actually like it's surprisingly kind of close to like my I was gonna say my job at the moment, if I can call it that, as like a PhD student. But
right,
in looking at because what I'm studying in particular is looking at like how games can kind of challenge people's perspectives, and a kind of branch of that I'm kind of looking into is kind of how games can kind of challenge the stigma around kind of mental health in particular. And it's really interesting that there's so many different ways to kind of tackle kind of sensitive topics, and a really good way to kind of get people who wouldn't necessarily engage in a subject is to in some way kind of almost like obfuscate the kind of, I guess, themes, and again in some cases leave it up to kind of their interpretation. Well, if you don't mind me asking, again, I don't want to get like I kind of do want to kind of get like deep in kind of nitty gritty. But like, what were some of the ways that you kind of went about kind of incorporating again this kind of this theme, but I guess shape it in a way that it was kind of what's the word? Again, what to I guess to leave it up to the player's interpretation.
Yeah, for sure. So I took it in a very thematic way. I took a thematic approach, and I kind of identified some themes that I wanted to explore that were associated with eating disorders and perhaps being trans as well. So I identified false promise, isolation, and sacrifice. And so I thought that those were things that I could weave into a story. And it was really important to me to set the adventure in a time period after something catastrophic had already happened, because I know there's a lot of really cool adventures that center on the players kind of trying to prevent the end of the world or stop an enormous war. And I was thinking, well, actually, what if that has already happened? What if the worst has already happened? And it's actually up to the players to kind of deal with the fallout. Like, what would that look like? And so I think that combining the setting with those themes, it allowed me to explore things in a metaphorical way. And it doesn't actually ever explicitly refer to any of those issues, but I think that if you're a player who maybe has had those experiences, they will be able to pick up on that. And I think that that might be emotionally resonant.
Yeah. So I must admit, I must admit the kind of what I kind of like about, I guess, dungeons in particular is the fact that they can, again, depending on who create the dungeon, you can kind of have, again, a good amount of leeway to kind of essentially have role play vistas. Was that something? So if you like, what was like one of the kind of most exciting, I guess, like dungeon, like was it kind of split into more traditional like dungeon rooms bit by bit, or?
Yeah, it was definitely a very traditional dungeon crawl. And interestingly, I challenged myself to make a dungeon crawl because that's actually my least favorite part of Dungeons and Dragons. I was like, oh, my challenge is I'm going to make a dungeon crawl that I am excited about and that I think would be fun to do. And I think that I'm really, really proud of the final room that I made, because the room is it's essentially a glass box and it's underwater. And I just thought that was a really cool visual arena to be in for the final battle. And I think that in terms of dungeon crawls, as you go through the dungeon, you find clues as to what actually happened and how the leader of this country got rid of the demons that were occupying it. And I think that I made some villains, and I made them quite sympathetic in the sense that you could understand why they did what they did, and you could understand like why these characters made these mistakes that were, with hindsight, very obviously bad ideas. But I wanted to make it a bit more complicated.
I mean, I must admit, just again, the kind of important visual of like a glass kind of room underwater, but then it also makes you think immediately like, oh, if there's any sort of like combat or any danger in that room, that's a really kind of exciting premise, because I love the kind of like environmental hazards or things that kind of prevent it, the kind of like the combat being like, okay, they hit us, we hit them. You kind of have to kind of work with what's going on in the room.
Yeah, thank you. I do have a mechanic in there that is, if you do initiate combat in that room, there's a chance that, you know, one of your weapons will break the glass and you'll get water starting to pour in. And that means that you'll have to start swimming. That means that at some point it will change to underwater combat. That means that the enemies are going to be affected by this in a certain way. And you have to make the choice whether you want to pursue them or whether you want to go back up the stairs and away from the water. So yeah, I'm with you. I love environmental hazards and I love fights that feel really dynamic as opposed to, you know, you move 2 squares forward and then you move away. And that's kind of it. Yeah. So
I also really like hearing how again the impetus behind it was the case of like, this is something that I don't necessarily enjoy, but I want to kind of tackle it in a way that I do. Is that kind of like a theme across some of your other kind of designs that you kind of work through, of like kind of working in areas that you think typically this hasn't kind of suited me before. Let's make something that actually works for me.
Yes. And I think to a degree, I think with this one, it was that, there are a lot of adventures that I've really loved and really admired, but I thought that I haven't really necessarily come across a dungeon crawl that I've been in love with. And so I'm like, I think actually this is an opportunity for me to make a dungeon crawl that I'm in love with. I think that it's a good way for me to challenge myself to produce something that's original. Whereas if I get inspired by all sorts of different places and I have to be careful not to consciously take too much from those places. Mm-hmm. Whereas if it's something that I'm not actually super into, then maybe my ideas might be a bit more original. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, 100%. Because I guess it's a case of it is easy to almost be like subconsciously like inspired by things that you're again really kind of into, like leaning into like particular like character tropes when it comes to like
for sure
designing things of like I am making a very suave swashbuckler. Maybe they shouldn't be so, so again, I can't help it. If they're swashbuckler, they're going to be attractive no matter who they are. I just can't help it. I just love pirates.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you get 3 pages in and you're like, oh no, that's just Errol Flynn. Oops.
So then I guess I'm curious, what would you think were some of the hardest challenges about, like, did you try to in kind of designing like a dungeon in that kind of way, were there elements of like a traditional dungeon crawl that you kind of wanted to kind of keep in? Or did you kind of throw everything in the kitchen sink out and kind of start from scratch?
I think I did start from scratch. I really wanted to emphasize exploration and role play. Also, because I myself, as a GM, I don't especially enjoy running combat, and I find it very difficult and very stressful. So actually, it's possible to get through this whole adventure without ever rolling initiative if your players are so inclined. And conversely, I did make sure that the DM knew to put in combat opportunities, but it's something that the DM actually has to introduce if the players don't actively set it off. Mm-hmm. I wanted there to be as many routes, not routes, I suppose, methods through this dungeon as possible. So you can resolve things peacefully, or alternately, if you are one of those players who just really enjoys killing every NPC in your path and killing everybody and taking over the kingdom, that's a thing you can do. Mm-hmm. There are a minimum of 7 different endings for this. You can be chaotic evil and win the game like that if you want.
Yeah, interesting. So, like, again, going with like the kind of like, again, I find myself falling into the case of like branching narratives and with kind of adventures, sometimes I do find it difficult to kind of like reel it in. How did you find yourself kind of like settling on like, nope, these are the 7 rather than
I said minimum of 7 because some groups will always do something that I will never have thought of, but I tried to cover as many kind of basic as these are the broadest different situations that you will end up in. Mm-hmm. I settled on those just because I wanted to have endings that felt very distinct and that felt like right for different parties. There are opportunities to convert some of the villains to your side, and then I thought about what would happen if you got one but maybe not all of them. Mm-hmm. Or there's an opportunity for the bad guys to escape at the end, and then how is there a way for that to feel satisfying and set up further adventures? Can it still be emotionally satisfying if they do escape? Mm-hmm. Things like that.
Well, yeah. I guess I must admit, like and you're looking at, for example, like I guess some of the official like Dungeons and Dragons like hardcover adventures. I must admit, some of the kind of like ending advice that they have, normally it's like sometimes like 2 or 3. It's like they win or lose, and then it's kind of the case of like at any point throughout this entire adventure, things could have branched off in every direction. That I think it's, for some things they do have to be like, I'm just going to hold my hands up as a like, you as a DM, this falls in the ball's in your court to try and work out what happens. But so I think taking I guess like a slight step back from Lake of Secrets then. And I must admit, I'm kind of curious to kind of ask a little bit about Crossroads.
Yeah, for sure.
Because again, it feels like I guess a kind of more, I guess, explicit tackling of, again, the kind of like, what was it? I think on the thing it says the intersection of grief and hope, which sounds, I think, I don't know, I can't tell if it's like that's like a good thing or not.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose it's a game for people who would like to work through those kinds of emotions by way of tabletop role-playing games. It's very different in the sense that it does directly name the emotion and the issues that you will be dealing with. And I wanted to tell a game that was more emotion driven. If that makes sense.
Yeah, and obviously, so this is being essentially like a completely again, correct me if I'm wrong. This was kind of like kind of built from the ground up.
Yes, this is my first kind of game that I have written, and it's not for any other particular system or part of anybody else's particular project. This just is my thing.
So again, one of my favorite kind of questions is, and it's always really good for system designers in particular. How did you find the process of, I guess, like systemizing, like again, even on to 2 Inspection, systemizing grief and hope?
I really wanted to start from a place of asking evocative questions and giving the players the chance to respond to them however they want to. I suppose actually I could say that also kind of comes from a journalistic background, because you have to get really good at asking questions. Yeah, but I started from that kind of place because I wanted to keep it brief but powerful, and I decided to go with prompts as a way to do that. So,
because it's kind of I guess, so using kind of like, I guess, like a deck of cards, or like a deck of, like, I guess you generate questions.
Yes.
What is, I guess, like, if you don't mind giving like I guess like an abridged version of like what's kind of like the kind of core gameplay loop that most players will kind of go through?
So essentially, you take turns drawing cards, and each card will have a different prompt on it. You will have the opportunity for everyone at the table to answer the prompt. And it's also possible for players to say, no, I don't want to answer that because it doesn't apply to my situation or it doesn't resonate with me, and that's okay. Also, there are 4 different decks. And so as you go through the decks, there are a certain number of map cards. And actually, there is a map making component. Because the idea is you arrive in this kind of liminal extra-dimensional space that is the Crossroads, and it's to the players over the course of the game to develop collectively what that looks like. And so within each deck, there are a certain number of map prompt cards, and those reduce in number depending on, like, as you go through the decks. So the earlier decks, there is a higher chance of drawing a map prompt card, and then so you'll draw that eventually, and then all the players will take the time to draw on the group map, and then once that is done, then that's your signal to move on to the next deck, and so on. Interesting. So it's kind of almost got like a kind of natural pacing to kind of make sure that kind of you go through the kind of stages and the decks of the game to kind of Interesting. I mean, that's how it's designed. And if you want to, it's possible. Like, some people have drawn the map prompt right off the bat and said, "Oh, we didn't actually get to explore any of the questions." And so if you feel like it's not right for you to move on yet, then you can still then you can be like, "Okay, I'll draw the map, but I'll keep exploring in this area if that's a thing you want to do." It's very flexible. So I guess with a game like this, how do you necessarily, I guess, like bring closure to kind of an experience like this? Because at the end, there is the card that ends the game is the name the path you take card, and it details and it asks the players to detail like how their character leaves and what the name they choose for their path is. It's also an option for them to stay, and it's an option for multiple characters to take the same path if they want to. But that's kind of how you leave the space. And that is kind of, it's closure in the sense that you leave the space that you've been playing in this whole time. But I think that it's mostly designed to reflect on that experience and to think about how it might have changed your character. Interesting. No, again, I must admit, I do kind of like the kind of I guess semi kind of like rules like role play heavy, where again the kind of the story is kind of very much dictated by a kind of collaborative effort of everyone kind of pitching in, and everyone's characters kind of growing over the course of that journey before kind of I guess venturing off in their own direction or choosing to stay.
I guess that kind of agency the player has to choose when and how it ends is kind of, I guess, quite key to, the kind of experience as a whole.
Yeah, thank you. I also forgot to mention that this game is GM-less, so it doesn't actually have a DM. You can, like, all the players, like, everybody is just playing with their own character. Although, if you want to, if you're really ambitious, you could have it as like a session 0 as a way for your characters to meet. If you are starting a campaign game, honestly, I would love to see someone do that.
Yeah. So I guess what was the kind of like, where did the idea or concept for Crossroads come from exactly?
I definitely wanted to write a game about grief and also the hope that kind of comes with it. It was an idea that I pitched to sign up for the tabletop mentorship program earlier this year, because they ask you for what kind of game you want to make in order to sign up for that. And so I thought, well, I would love to make a game like this. I've never made a game that is this kind of I guess free in terms of mechanics, and I hadn't written a draft for it at that point. So it just really came from the idea of wanting to explore these emotions and trying to create a framework that enabled players to do that in a kind of fantastical way.
Yeah. I'm curious, have you got much kind of like response from people who've kind of gone through and kind of played the game themselves?
I actually have. I was able to play test it 3 times, and then I've also done some hype swaps. And actually, one of the people who I swapped my game with, he said it was like his second favorite game that he'd ever played or something. And I was like, wow. Oh my gosh, really? Wow. So that was really amazing to hear.
Yeah. Were there any kind of like particular like tales that kind of came from that game?
He said that he played it as himself with his partner, and I thought, like, oh wow, I hadn't actually thought of someone playing it as themselves. Like, the expectation is to create a character, but like, of course, that's not necessarily the wrong way to play it. I was just very surprised, and I was like, oh, this is a really cool way to take it. So if you're prepared to do that, that's also another option.
I guess it almost feels like, again, correct me if I'm wrong, but with a kind of game like this, if you are creating a character, I guess it almost feels like that character is almost like in some cases, maybe like a thinly veiled version of you.
Oh yeah, of course. I mean, in any kind of, I think that's kind of been the case for every character that I've created. At least there are some aspects of myself, but of course there's going to be some aspects that are different. And it isn't necessarily asking you to explore something that you've personally experienced. It's just asking you to think about the emotion.
Yeah. No. Yeah. And because I think it's kind of something that like a good amount of video games kind of could kind of put you in situations and kind of experiences is that you hadn't necessarily thought or considered, and just through the kind of the virtue of placing yourself and being kind of open to kind of these kind of emotions, it kind of broadens your emotional palette. But that sounds so, I don't know. I was just like, oh, why did I say that? That's as it kind of came out of my mouth.
No, that's okay. I think I get what you mean.
Yeah, nice. Good. I'm glad someone does. So I guess more broadly then. Would you say there's like a kind of particular pattern to your kind of creative process as a whole, or like where your ideas start and kind of begin?
That's a good question. I mean, I always have ideas, and there are so many stories that I want to tell and enable other people to tell. I would say that I like to tell stories that have emotions at their core, but at the same time, I like to do kind of wacky, weird stuff that doesn't necessarily always make sense. And I always just have ideas that I need to put down on a piece of paper somewhere. So I don't know if there's a pattern. I'm still kind of working that out yet, because I've been thinking a lot about, like, what's your personal brand and all of that kind of stuff. And I'm honestly not sure yet, but I think that as I create more games, I think I will see a pattern start to emerge, or at least I'm really hoping. And then that way I can be like, okay, this is the kind of game that I will make.
Do you kind of something like it, like, so again, as going back to me earlier, so now I'm kind of in that lull between projects. Is it the fact that when you kind of go back to your list, it's easier to kind of get attached to one of those items, or is it sometimes you just kind of get that lightning strike of inspiration of like, oh, I've just got to do this idea now?
I'm super attached to all of them, and I'm very committed. I just have to kind of organize them in my brain and figure out which one is right for me to write at this time, and like when to start it, and like how to tell it now. Now that I've kind of branched out into making all sorts of different games, I have to think of, like what system should I use for this? Should I try to make my own thing, or is there an existing system out there that will serve it? I have to make all sorts of kind of decisions like that. So that's kind of the main thing that has meant that I haven't finished any of them yet, but I will.
Yeah, I think that there's always that case as well, because there are always those kind of ideas that like you look at them and you just kind of know, it's like, I'm not ready to. I want to do this so badly, but I just don't feel like emotionally ready for it to do that idea justice.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, there's a lot of times that I've thought like, oh, this is a great idea, but can the execution live up to the concept?
Yeah, and
that's a big thing.
I think, I don't know. I'm anytime I've kind of attempted art, like physical kind of drawing, there's always that idea I have in my head of like a, I don't know, like a fully formed Pegasus, and then it's like like a stick horse
stick
coming
figure.
out, and I'm like, no, the idea in my head, it was so yeah.
I found it very encouraging actually to see things on Twitter that are like, you know, artists saying, please, if you commission me, please send a sketch, even if it's like a terrible stick figure. And I'm like, all right, then I will send you a terrible stick figure. And I've done this multiple times, and every time they've said, no, actually, this is great.
Yeah.
And it's just been very funny to me to put the stick figure and the final picture next to each other and be like, oh, I see. So you managed to see what was in my brain. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I honestly, like, there's always part of me of like, you know how like sometimes there's like special editions of like books released, just have like a sort of like writer art version where instead of like the fully rendered like fantastic art of the eye, there's just the little stick drawings kind of scattered.
Oh yeah,
and
absolutely.
Yeah,
it's
everything's
great.
kind of written in crayon, and there's like the editor remarks all through it. Because I said this the other day, that like one thing that is always kind of slightly, I don't know if frustrating is the right word, but when you're going through the process of like creating anything really, you're not necessarily seeing like the process in the finished product. You can't just necessarily be like highlight a paragraph and add like, I don't know, I guess you could. There's nothing stopping you, but it's not. I guess it's not like it's not common to like have a little section like, hey, this is a author's note, by the way. This took 3 iterations, and it started off as I don't know, like it started off as a goblin with a hammer, and now it's a goblin with 3 hammers, you know? Or
yeah. No, I know what you mean. I think that kind of content, like it could be really cool to release annotated editions or something like that. But I don't think I'm quite at the stage in my career where people necessarily care for that. But I've thought about it as in like, you know, I think it would be interesting to give a kind of, you know, director's commentary on your work. I mean, it's something that I would love to do, and it's something that I would love to see more people doing, but I haven't quite figured out how to execute it yet.
Yeah, I think I guess it's kind of like what format that takes, whether that is like a kind of an alternate PDF, or whether it's like I don't know, like a video of you kind of scrolling through the document and kind of talking about things that kind of were interesting through the process. But I don't know, I'm always super appreciative of anyone who kind of pulls back the curtain behind their kind of like design process.
Yeah, of course. I mean, that's why I love coming on podcasts like this and talking about it, because this is a way to do it.
No, so then I guess kind of digging, I guess a little bit deeper then. So as you're working through, you know, from start to finish, is there like a part of the process that like is kind of hands down your favorite?
Honestly, my favorite part of any project is me getting the idea and having the inspiration to put words on a page, and just having a wicked level of motivation and excitement to do it. Like, I love that. Yeah. It's great. And I just get so excited, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like there's an actual project that I'm actually going to make happen, and I'm writing it, and I am enjoying the process of writing it. Yeah. Like, that's my favorite.
Is it? I guess so. What? I guess my question is like more nitty-gritty, but like where? So do you start from like the beginning, or do you kind of latch on to like a very kind of particular part of the project and kind of start writing there?
I try to start from the beginning, but I mean, what has helped is dividing it up into sections. And if I haven't written out the introduction, I mean, I usually do the introduction last. I find that I really struggle with that. And sometimes, you know, you need to write a game to actually understand what it is you've just written, you know? Yeah. So I won't necessarily start at the beginning as in, you know, start on page 1, but I will find somewhere to start. And I'll just, if I have ideas for a bit of it and I don't have any ideas for certain other bits, then that's okay. I'll just go with whatever it is the idea that I have, and I'll make notes. My note stage is very, very messy. I have like a Discord server just for myself, and I have a channel for each project I'm working on. And so if a thought comes to me at 3 a.m. or something, I can sit up in bed, get out my phone and be like, I'm going to make this note for myself for later, and, you know, not forget it, and then I'll go back to sleep.
Well, yeah. I've never thought about that. I've never thought about having like a solo Discord server. And just because it already has like kind of like the folder, so like, or like threads, or like the kind of way to keep everything sorted.
It does, yeah. It's quite useful.
That's.
I mean, I should probably get a proper program like Scrivener or something. But I'm still just a shit poster. I need my Discord server.
I'm still on like was it my phone's notepad document, and I don't know, Discord that feels like the brain diagram of like that I'm just here like with my and you're just like the next tier.
Yeah, and then like Galaxy Brain is something like Scrivener, but I'm like medium brain, like big brain. Yeah, Discord is big brain.
No, it's big brain. No, because I think I'm very much the same. I think I've said a few times before is just because I do a lot of adventure work. I'm a big fan of my finely tuned sort of adventures like skeleton that I have now. That over the time of like the many projects I've done, I've kind of moved around bits and bobs that I kind of like and kind of sections that I think are kind of important. And then it's kind of easy to kind of again work through again, because once it's kind of you have that kind of layout or skeleton, it's easy to kind of like flesh it out and fill out those chunks where the kind of inspiration strikes.
Definitely. Having a template or an outline to start from is much less intimidating than just looking at a blank page thinking, oh God, I have to start from zero.
Was that an aspect to Crossroads that was quite challenging then? Is the fact that again you're starting from nothing, I guess.
It came very naturally in the sense that I knew that I wanted to have 4 decks, and so I could have the cards subheading with all their different names, and I knew that I wanted to have an introduction that told players that you have to use safety tools at the table, and this is explicitly what the game is going to be about. And I know that I wanted to have a piece on character creation, even if there weren't any mechanics necessarily associated with it.
Yeah.
I knew that it had to have all of those elements, and so that came quite naturally to me.
Yeah. No, I guess
sometimes it works out like that. You just kind of have pieces that you need.
Yeah, because I guess the moment the moment you kind of know that you're using a deck, you're just like, well, now I have to kind of write what each card means, and that's like, there you go. That's a table. And that's kind of an easy kind of. I must admit, I do really enjoy like filling out tables, like especially when you have like any sort of like table of like I don't know, like a D20 ideas or anything like that. Those are kind of always quite fun and kind of like fun to kind of dip into, because you can often sometimes just let your imagination kind of go and kind of not kind of reel it in any sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I like tables as well, because it's a very measurable goal. If I know I need 20 items in the table, I will just put 20 items on the table. And then later, if I read it and I'm like, I don't actually quite like this one, I have a better idea now, I can replace it and feel like I've improved it. It's a very it's a nice kind of micro task as part of working on a larger thing. And I like that.
Yeah, and I must admit, I've been the case of I'm gonna put a D8 table. And then I'm like 6 ideas in, and like, did I say D8? I meant a D6.
It's a D6 table. Now. Yeah, exactly. And I like that. I like that flexibility with it too. It's just like, if you don't come up with enough ideas, it doesn't have to be a D8 table. You're good.
Yeah. No, so there you go. Tables. We're both big fans.
Absolutely. I love roll tables.
Which leads into my next question nicely. What are you not a big fan of in terms of your career process?
Okay, so actually my least favorite part of any project is, it's pretty ironic, but it's marketing, because I actually work in marketing as a day job. But when it comes to my own products, I just really hate having to go out of my way to market them, because on one hand, I know I have this product that I'm really proud of and that I want to share with people and that I genuinely think they'd like. But on the other hand, I know that everyone is broke and tired, and I don't really like having to shout into the void about how great my game is. And it also kind of forces me to look at engagement statistics and click-through rate, and it's just a very soulless way to approach things. I do not like marketing at all. Yeah, no, I guess like talk. I think you kind of mentioned it before in terms of like, you mentioned it in the context of like journalism, of like wearing many hats. But it is pretty much exactly the same for like RPG creation, and that even once you're done with the product, you then you have to take off your designer hat. You then have to put your marketing hat on and kind of go on and I think it's easy to kind of like, I guess the one thing that I know I'm kind of like I'm quite bad at is the fact that even if a product is like, I don't know, released 6 months ago, you can still do marketing for it, every now and then to kind of like, hey, I made this a little while ago. But it's, I don't know, I guess to other people, it will be new and flashy. But there's always like, I guess as you as a designer, you're always like,
that's old. I made that 6 months ago. Yeah,
exactly. And like, there's always just the pressure because, you know, to a degree, like you're also a content creator. I'm like, can I really keep talking about this thing that I made a year ago? How much life does it have in it? Are people going to be sick of me talking about it? And then I have to remember that, like, actually, if people are sick of me talking about it, they can just unfollow me. I'll just talk about it. We'll see.
So yeah. If you don't mind me asking then, so from your day job of working in marketing, was there anything that has kind of like, I guess, followed over in the way that you market your like your RPG projects?
I think that in terms of learning how to write compelling like ad copy, I think that's been useful. Marketing, I mean, Twitter is interesting because it's the primary social media site that I use. I'm not really on anything else, and it's changed a lot even in the year that I've just been writing. And publishing RPGs, which is the last year. And I don't know. It's just from my day job, it's very much things like, you know, blog writing and longer form stuff and looking at a company's engagement overall. So it's been different in the sense that mine for RPGs is very Twitter focused. Yeah. But yeah, definitely like writing ad copy is good. And things like finding a good image and making a good image and having to crop it to specific to make it specifically so that it'll fit within Twitter's parameters. Like that's something I've learned. Yeah.
No, I must admit, I guess talking about it and how Twitter has changed, I must admit, it does feel like they're actively working against like people marketing.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like they're doing things like suppressing external links and checking, like, depending on the hashtag you use, your tweet may or may not get seen by the algorithm. Like they absolutely, like, their investment is they want to keep people on the site as long as possible, and they do not want you to click to go to other places. It's very difficult.
No, because I remember I'm so grateful, like, people who kind of have kind of like a keen sense to this stuff. And I remember seeing that this is kind of like the go-to cheat, like, I guess cheat sheet for releasing a product now is the fact that you tweet about it, where you have the link to the thing, you pin that on your profile. Then when you make another kind of announcement tweet about it, you have an image in the post. I think you use no more than 2 or 3 hashtags. I think you have to also limit the number of people you tag. And then in the next, you can't even link it in the main tweet anymore. You have to go like to the thread of the tweet to then point back at your profile.
You have to put the link in the replies, or else your tweet is going to get suppressed into hell and no one will ever see it. Yep.
I'm just amazed that like someone figured that all out and they went through the tedious effort of doing all these kind of posts to kind of work out impressions.
Yeah, absolutely. And people will go through and test these things and be like, no, I tried this, it's proven, like I have data to back it up, and it's really impressive.
Yeah. So I
appreciate people sharing that information.
But I am with you, especially again if the marketing in a social space where, again, that's where a good chunk of the tabletop RPG industry is, and to try and market in something that is in some way actively hostile against our best efforts is.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I mean, marketing, it's just, by the time I'm finished the project, I have the high of, oh my gosh, it's finished and it's published and it's out there, and then it's like, oh wait, I now have a ton more work to do to make sure that people actually see it. Oh, all right, then I guess I'll do this. Yeah.
Oh, hot damn. I'm gonna, again, I don't want to spend any more, like we end up on like a Twitter rant.
True. Yeah.
So I would like to chat more about you and your design process. We mentioned a little bit earlier how you were quite proud of the final room in Lake of Secrets, but I'm more curious about everything that you've kind of done so far.
Sure.
If there is like a particular design choice or something that you've implemented that you're particularly proud of.
Yeah, I think that a design choice that I'm really proud of, I think that in my most recently released game, it's called VAMP CAMP, The Ways We Feel Alive. I made a table of vampire traits for the player character to use when they're creating during character creation. And I like that they those kind of subvert white vampire traditions, because it's a game that I wrote for BIPOC Vamp Jam. And so you have traits like you're a vampire of color, so the melanin in your skin protects you from the sun. And I love that as a design choice because it allows characters to experience positive aspects of being a brown vampire.
No, interesting. So it was essentially, again, correct me. So what was the name of was it like a game jam prompt?
Yes, it's a game jam game. It's on itch because right now there's an event going on. It's called BIPOC Vamp Day, and so as part of that, a bunch of Black, Indigenous, and designers of color are making games like about vampires. Some of them are drawing on cultural traditions that are underrepresented, or some of them are just like, nah, it's just a game about brown vampires. So that's a whole thing that's happening right now, and so it's my first game jam. So I was really excited to be a part of it too.
So what were some of the ways that you kind of like, I guess, tackled the kind of like player traits? Was it that was it another table perchance?
It was indeed a table, and I was like, you know what, I can make this a table and people can roll or choose from it. It can be really fun. It was something like, well, you can't get any nutritional benefits from human food, but it doesn't mean you can't eat it, and also garlic won't kill you. It's just a bit spicy. I thought that was quite funny. Yeah.
So I had like a like a weird thought about vampires, because sometimes, like, obviously stereotypically there is that case of like they don't have a reflection.
Yeah, definitely. And that's something that's also a trait in my table. It's actually, you can see yourself in a mirror, you can take selfies. Yeah.
But the one thing is, like, it's one that's something is like sometimes inconsistent. It's the fact that sometimes they'll be like, the vampires just like had a feast and they look in the mirror and they can see like the blood.
Yeah.
And then I'm always like, is it
okay? But how is that working?
Is it the case? Like, I don't know. Like, because if you could see again, maybe I'm getting too into it, and maybe I'm just thinking way too much about it. But like, it would be worse if the vampire couldn't see themselves, but they could see everything that's like within them. Like,
and honestly, I think that's cool. Because I'm really into body horror as well, so I think that's cool. There could be a really fun way to interpret that. Like, you don't see yourself, you have no skin, you're just a mess of organs and bones. Like, that's cool. Give me that.
Yeah.
But okay. There are different approaches you can take to it, though. I mean, have you seen What We Do in the Shadows?
I have, yeah. No, I've seen again the kind of. Funny enough, it was a case of where I fell down a YouTube rabbit hole. And then they kind of did the rest. But yeah, I do like their kind of their
take on it. Their take on it, because they draw pictures of themselves to try and show the others what they look like. I think that you can be fun about it as well. And I think this game that I have definitely leans more into the comic side of things.
Yeah, I must admit, I think that's kind of I'm kind of a big kind of fan that kind of leans on the kind of levity side of things, just because I think it's more of, I don't know, maybe I'm getting too deep, but more of who I am as a person. I can't help but make jokes even at the best of times.
Of course, I'm the same way. I mean, I love horror and I love comedy, and I've done games that are both. But I mean, I definitely want to write more comedy games. I think that would be fun.
Because I think as well, just because anything that kind of it's like the game is like always saying like, hey, you could make jokes in this game, and it's not ruining the experience for anyone else. I think I'm discovering that now, because again, speaking of vampires, I'm running a Curse of Strahd campaign.
Ooh, I've always wanted to play that. Yeah. I've played Death House, but I've always wanted to do the actual campaign. That's so exciting.
Just for the collection of players that I have, in no way, shape, or form could I ever run this as a spooky horror in any sense of like a big foreboding Strahd. They're just they run about with tents. And they get up to all sorts of wacky hijinks. You just got to lean into it and just like, okay,
exactly. And it just depends on what the tone is at your table. And I think that like it is really important to have a conversation about tone from the outset, because if you as a GM are trying to create a certain atmosphere and it's like the players constantly are pushing back against that and doing what they think is fun, then there's clearly a discrepancy in ideas here. So I think if you just, as long as it's the right tone for your table, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it kind of goes back to kind of some of the kind of safety tools you mentioned about with like Crossroads. It's the fact that definitely going into the experience, making sure that everybody's on the same page, that there's no kind of no surprises, and everyone can kind of like the most at the very least, people should know what they're getting into, which is the kind of the best way to kind of ensure everyone has a good time.
Right.
No, awesome. Well, then I guess to the last question, then kind of round off the kind of your creative process as a whole. Is there kind of like a lesson that you've learned that if you could hop into the DeLorean?
Yes. This is going to sound like the most basic lesson. There's probably going to be a bunch of people out there who are like, oh, I already know what I'm doing. I don't need to pay attention to this. But I really wish that I actually learned and internalized properly that it's okay to start with a very small project. Like people already told me, like I signed up to the RPG writer workshop, and one of the first lessons was, well, make sure you set a manageable goal. And I was like, well, I mean, I already have a draft. So in my opinion, I'm way ahead of everyone else who's already here. So, I know what I'm doing. It's fine. And then, I was like, well, what do you mean? I'm only writing one adventure. And then I got so caught up in it that it took me like a whole year from start to finish to get it published. Like it's 22 pages with original art and like VTT tokens. And I did the layout myself. And it was just a lot to manage. And then earlier this year, I started writing shorter games to publish on Itch. And I was getting those done in a couple of weeks. I still get the same amount of satisfaction out of having a complete game. And so I'm like, why did I take so long on this thing? I mean, I guess I'm glad I did. I came again, like I had a product that I was really proud of, but it doesn't necessarily have to be something that takes like months and months to do. And I think it's actually, there are benefits to just writing a game that's 3 pages and it can be complete then. I think that there was some part of me that was worried that like if it wasn't long enough or if it didn't have enough content, then it wouldn't be like legit or taken seriously. And I think that like I've since realized that like it's actually less important to be taken seriously than it is to just have a game that you've managed to finish and that is your game,
Yeah. I think that the toughest thing is about, particularly with RPGs, is the fact that it is really hard to judge like a project's length from like starting at nothing, like starting from the
get-go. It really is, yes.
Yeah. Just because you again, even like with like an adventure of like, oh, I'll just make a dungeon. That should be easy. There's only X number. And
then I'm like 20 pages later, like, oh no, I have to write the end of this.
And I guess it's something that you kind of I don't know. Here's the thing. I was about to say it's something that you learn with experience, but I haven't learned it yet. And
right.
Maybe it's just something that I will never learn.
Who knows? I mean, if it works for you, then it's fine. But I just don't think I ever want to spend a whole year on one singular game before, just because I like to be able to start and finish a project. And I don't really like interrupting that process by starting another one. And, it gets a bit messy.
I think I spoke to another designer who I kind of found my kind of process nicely, is the fact that I ebb and flow between short and long projects. Because sometimes it is nice to just, as you kind of said, to get the satisfaction of working on a smaller project, getting it from start to finish and just getting it kind of out there. But I think sometimes I personally like to, I guess, lose myself or sink my teeth into something big, which can sometimes be, again, it's again, because little spoilers, but so in the last week or so, I've been going back through all the podcasts I've done and kind of collating people's answers.
Ooh,
and it's kind of interesting that, again, a good number of people kind of expressed the same thing of like, one, keep your project small if you can, and two, in generally of like what most people kind of don't find less enjoyable about the whole process is finishing a project. And if the project is again bigger than or large in scope, it's significantly harder to get it past the finish line because there's 20 times more to do.
Right. Yeah. And I think that being told make sure your project is manageable. I don't think that as a new designer, it's especially encouraging because what you really want to hear is your ideas are amazing. You should run as far with them as possible. And I mean, even though nobody was actually trying to be discouraging, I think I took that as a slight as, oh, maybe your ideas are too ambitious. And I'm like, no, they're not. I'll show you, kind of thing. And you know what I mean? So I think that if I had actually paid attention to what that lesson was trying to say, as opposed to taking it personally, then I think maybe we might have ended up somewhere different, but maybe we might not have. And it's okay. I know that now. So
what I was going to say, you've also got kind of an interesting trajectory because you started within the RPG writer workshop and now you're kind of like an instructor for the Storytelling Collective.
Yes, I am. And that was really exciting.
So do you mind talking me through that? How did that happen?
Absolutely. So I saw that Ashley Warren, who is the workshop director, she put out a call on Twitter saying, oh, I'm having a problem because a lot of people who I would contact to be instructors are busy and can't do it. So if you're interested, then, send me an email with these details. And so I was like, oh, that's a really cool opportunity because the Storytelling Collective workshop really helped me in terms of getting this adventure off the ground. It did so much of the, it helped me do so much of the groundwork towards towards understanding TTRPG design, I was like, okay, it's a really cool thing to be involved in. I would love to have the chance to give back to the community in that way. Yeah. And I was really, really thrilled when she got back to me saying, oh, are you interested in writing this lesson? And the lesson was studying the source books and TTRPG style guides, specifically for D&D, and that's the lesson that I ended up writing. And it doesn't sound like the most riveting topic, but I understand that it was really important. And she said that that's a step that people have been missing, and so it might be worthwhile to have a lesson dedicated to it. And I really enjoyed writing that because I was able to speak to some of the things that some of the issues that I had when I was working with the style guide and the source books. Like, I noticed patterns, like there were just certain mechanical syntax that I felt like I had to use because that was the way that they had done it. And then I realized that actually it didn't mean that I couldn't find other ways to insert my own writing style. It just meant that that was just the most clear and most concise and least ambiguous way to put it. And it's actually the most helpful for the DM to process as they're reading your adventure. It's not supposed to mean that you can't write anything original. Yeah. So it was really cool to speak to that, and I think that it was really nice to be accepted for that opportunity because it made me think like, wow, I've actually come quite a long way in my own journey as an RPG writer and designer. Like, cool. I guess I kind of know what I'm doing, which is really neat.
Yeah, no, I get it. It's always the classic case of like the student becomes yeah. No, it's honestly the particularly with like because the working kind of towards a DMsGuild or kind of drive-through publication, working with the kind of the style guide, again, it can be quite finicky. And I must admit, it did take me longer than I'd like to admit, because 9 times out of writing, I will just probably like write with like 2, maybe 3 adventure books next to me. And anytime I'm kind of like, how did they do like, I don't know, like a bear trap? And then I would like, go over the thing and I would like, okay, that's how they did the bear trap and stuff like that. Try and keep it as the wording as concise and clear as possible.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I originally did try to be like, I would do the same thing. I would have the book beside me and I'd be like, oh, I need to look up how this ability is worded for this monster. And then I started out being like, oh, okay, well, I need to say that, but I need to say it differently because I don't know, is this copyrighted or something? Yeah. And it's like, no, actually, you can copy paste and just replace the DC with whatever your DC is, and that's actually fine. And actually, it's encouraged because that's just that's just the way that most people will recognize and expect it to be written, and that's okay because that's an issue of concision.
So I obviously people listening again. So over the course of this podcast, I've had the pleasure to chat to so many people who have, I guess, graduated through the RPG Writer Workshop or the Storytelling Collective courses. And this again a personal like endorsement of like, if you're even interested, you should definitely participate, but not to kind of give like a free lesson or anything. But within the the stuff that you teach, is there like one little tidbit that you're just like, oh, this is some good information that everyone should know?
In terms of, I think that trying to remember what my lesson was. I think, well, the exercises, because when you're writing a lesson, you can give them the content, and you can also give people like homework or assignments to do. And so mine, I did 2. Mine was to find look at your source book and then find 2 instances of where a mechanic in 2 different places is phrased exactly the same way. And the idea behind that is for you to realize, oh, like Wizards of the Coast does this all the time, so therefore it's okay for me to do it. And it doesn't mean that that I'm copying them. It means that this is just how it is expected to be done. And then the other half of it is to write your own mechanic and check it against the style guide and switch with somebody else. So and also because like the idea is between looking for the one where you have to find a place where a mechanic appears exactly the same way, the idea for that is you actually do have to read the source book in order to find that. So I mean, either that or you can just Control F it or something, but like I can't stop you. But like the idea behind that is to get familiar with how things are phrased and to understand that this is exactly the same process that that the licensed adventure writers at Wizards of the Coast will do it. And I kind of had a big brain moment when I was coming up with that. I was like, oh, hopefully people actually do this, even if it's kind of annoying and they don't actually want to read the source book, because like it's my job to get you to read the source book. So I don't know if that's necessarily a tidbit, but that's kind of something you can expect in like in my lesson, and so to look out for it.
No, I guess, but it's always a case of like once you kind of have gone through the process of looking something up twice, it gets easier to kind of like again, even having just like a library in your mind to be like, okay, well, I need that bear trap again, or I need this kind of mechanic, and just being able to like I don't know.
And being able to know, and being able to know where to find and to reference it, to look it up, to check your own work against it. It's really useful.
Yeah. But you build it up over time, and there you go. That's
you do. And then eventually you just kind of get into the rhythm of it, and you get used to it, and you won't need to think about it anymore. If you like, once it's familiar and it's in your mind, like it's just there.
So actually, funny enough, so talking about like the Storytelling Collective as a whole, then I feel like that's like a good kind of springing off point to kind of, I guess, talk about the community as a whole. And if there's anyone kind of, I guess, in the community that kind of particularly stands out as a point of inspiration for you.
Yeah, so someone in the TTRPG community that inspires me actually is Jess, who is Burst of Hope on Twitter. I think I mentioned the Tabletop Mentorship program earlier this year. That's a different program that I signed up to make Crossroads, and they were really, really helpful, and they have a lot of knowledge about the TTRPG space. And I was able to meet, like through them, I was able to meet a whole other community of people. I was able to get engaged with Utopia, which is a server and a channel for Black, Indigenous, and people of color in TTRPGs. So I got a lot out of that program. That was really, really cool.
Wow. So, and I must admit that it kind of I was about to say springing off again, which if there were any that was written, editors would like using the same terms again.
It's okay. You can just say it's mechanical syntax. That'll be fine.
No, but I think you kind of touched on a really interesting point about the kind of the power of kind of finding, I guess, like a kind of community or a kind of collection of kind of, I guess, like-minded creatives that you kind of feel safe to kind of, I don't know, engage in the community as a whole, and kind of go back to the whole message of, high tides raise all ships and all that.
Yeah, exactly. It's true. And I think that's definitely something that I needed. It was really, really helpful because they were able to, like, our working styles were very similar. They were able to ask questions that really challenged me to make my game design process better. And they also helped facilitate my playtest, because that came through Utopia as well. And there were a lot of people who were like, I actually am interested in playing this game and providing feedback. And I was like, oh, wow. I've kind of always been nervous to do that, just because playtesting takes a lot of time. So that was exciting.
I was going to guess, just because we didn't necessarily touch on it earlier, but what was the kind of the process of the mentorship from kind of start to finish? Was it quite a
so like it runs regularly. You can apply to be a mentor or a mentee. I applied to be a mentee. You come to them with an idea, and you're able to select things like I would like a mentor who challenges me, or I would like a mentor who cheerleads me, and this is what I'm looking to get out of the mentorship. And you can get into kind of granular details, and also be like, this is the kind of person I'm looking to work with. I also would prefer to work with a queer person of color. That's a thing you can say on the application. Mm-hmm. And so they did a really, really good job of matching people, and I've been really impressed with that. But in terms of the mentorship itself, it involves kind of like regular meetings with your mentor, and then check-ins with the project. I think they do provide documentation as a way to formalize this a bit, but I didn't necessarily use that as much. I just kind of had regular check-ins with my mentor, and it was really helpful even just to have someone to be accountable to, because I tend not to want to talk about my projects that are in development, because there's always something in the back of my mind that's like, no, you can't say anything about it, because then if you do, and then something happens and then you don't finish it, then you're going to have like let all these people on to think that you're working on something, and now you have to tell them that it's not going to happen. Like, and I really want to avoid that. But
you've like you've NDA'd yourself.
Basically. And it's just because I don't really like being like talking to people about my work when it's in development, because I just don't know if it's going to, unless I'm 100% sure that it is going to happen. And that's something I'm trying to get over, actually.
Yeah.
And also because like I understand that like there is a certain appeal to saying, haha, I just come out with finished products ever, and none of you ever see my process because you had no idea I was working on this. So I'm really intimidating, and I've just pulled a finished product out of thin air. But it's like, actually, I've learned that people, do like seeing people in the process of it, and do like knowing where they're at in the production stage or what have you.
Yeah, no, I must admit, just hearing you talk about it, it's like I'm so guilty of that. I don't know what it is, but like I feel like it almost feels like mentally, it feels like it kind of lessens, like, when you do like the big reveal of like, haha, if you've kind of gone around beforehand going, hey, this thing's I'm working on, it feels, I don't know, it just doesn't feel as magical.
It feels less dramatic, right? And I like to just be dramatic and be like, oh, I've been working on this thing for a whole year and you didn't know about it. But I've come to realize that there is actually benefit to doing that, because then it creates ways for you to talk to other designers about their own processes, and it opens you up a bit more. So I'm trying to get used to that.
No, I guess as well, because it is that case of necessarily of like when the people you've kind of been speaking to about it, when they actually do kind of see, the post about it, they're like, hey, that's that thing that I know about.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, oh, and then sometimes people message me being like, oh, I'm so happy that like the thing you've been working on forever is finally happening. And I'm like, oh, thank you. Like, I appreciate your support. Whereas it's difficult to get support for things if they don't know if you're working on it. So that's another aspect of it.
Yeah. So I guess like one last thing about it. So do you think you're on a similar trajectory of going from mentee to mentor? Is that?
I don't know. I'm probably going to have to think about that one for a bit, but it's something I'd love to do eventually. Yeah. But I think I'm going to have to figure out actually giving good advice as opposed to teaching someone a lesson. I think that's slightly different, but that would be something I would love to do in the future.
No, awesome. Yeah. Well, I mean, looking at the time, Sebastian, we've gone and done it. We've nattered away for an hour.
Yeah, we sure did. Wow.
Yeah, there you go. See, it's just like, again, this is like I call this my podcast is like the Feywild. Time works differently here.
It does.
You blink and the time is gone. But before leaving, I don't want to leave without hearing some of the interesting stuff that you're currently working on. And as well for the people listening, where can they kind of stay up to date and hear about
okay, so I am an editor for the upcoming volume of the Uncaged anthology, which is Uncaged Goddesses. I am super excited to work on that. Like, I am so excited to work on that. You have no idea. I haven't started my editing assignments yet. That will be happening later on in the year, but I will not be able to speak too much about it until it's happened. But yeah, it's going to be really, really good. Like, I promise. Yeah.
No.
And I have a game that I'm working on personally. It's going to be a kind of frivolous game where you introduce your own original characters to a bunch of people and from different universes. I have a couple more 5e supplements in the works. And as for people getting news about my work, follow me on Twitter at Sebastian Yūe, all one word. I'm very active on there, and I have a love-hate relationship with that platform, as does everybody, I assume.
Yeah. No, I don't think anyone. I don't know. I wouldn't trust anyone who said that they love Twitter.
Yeah, I know. It's like you love it. Do you love it though? Yeah. What does that mean? Like you love getting your content retweeted and feeling good about yourself, right? Like you don't love Twitter, like because Twitter certainly doesn't love you. Yeah,
no, like I said, I'm chained to the app, and I haven't worked out who's pulling who along yet.
Exactly.
It varies on day to day, Sometimes
it does. Yeah. It really does.
No, well, awesome. Well, fantastic. Thank you so much. This has been an absolute blast.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. This has been really fun.
So the only thing I have to say is, I've been Matthew Whitby. You can find me at Whitby Writes. You guys know I haven't got anything to release just yet, but keep waiting. Things are on the horizon. Which I think I have said for the last, I think even 10 episodes. But time is different here. So that's my excuse. But I do want to ask my favorite question of the podcast, and I'll give you the most important one, which is how do you end a podcast?
Well, my marketing brain is going, well, say that you're Matthew Whitby and you're from the DMsGuild house, but like you just did that. So like you did all the tagline and stuff, and you did like this is where you can catch me this time next week, next person, all of that stuff.
I can do it again.
Yeah, do it again.
I'll do it again. Yeah. So anyway, thank you so much for listening to the Dungeon Masters Guild House. I've been Matthew Whitby. I've been joined by the fantastic Sebastian Yūe, and be sure to tune in this time next week for more shenanigans.